for coming out. It's good to see you. I'm Brandon, and I've been in Creative Mornings a lot of times, so it's an honor and a pleasure to be standing up here, being the one telling you stuff. Like you said, I work at Oblong, and what Oblong exists to do is basically create the next generation of interfaces between humans and computers. The way we do that, we're only doing one part of that. We're not creating the entire future. I'll touch on that a little bit. But first, I'm going to give you a little background on me. Let's see here. There we go. So I was a big reader as a kid. I am a big reader. I was an English major, and actually started a PhD in literature at one time, long ago. I did not finish that. But one of the things that draws you in, if you're a reader of books, is the imaginary worlds. Science fiction, fantasy, historical, whatever it is. And another thing that draws you in, if you're a kid in the 80s, is the imaginary worlds available in a computer. Excuse me. My dad bought me a computer game called Neuromancer when I was 12. And this was the cover of it. I don't know why he picked it up, but he just thought it would look, I might have fun. So I was playing this on my Apple IIe, and it's a really good game if you ever played it. It's a really compelling game, and I got stuck. It's kind of a hard game in some places. There was a particular access code to get past a particular level in the game, and I couldn't find it within the world of the game. And so I got the idea that, well, I learned that Neuromancer was also a book. So I thought, well, I'll go get this book, and maybe I can find the access code actually in the text of the book. And it worked. One of the characters says it to another character when they're doing this cool break-in of this like megacorp, and that totally works in the game. And I think maybe you have to do that to solve the game, but it was really cool. The other thing in this book is the idea of cyberspace, which it introduced me to that word, to that concept. William Gibson invented that concept in this book, which he wrote on a typewriter. You might have heard later incarnations of the concept of cyberspace, such as the metaverse. But consensual hallucination experienced by people coming together in this shared imaginary world that represents all the world's sort of data and computer systems. So it's a version or a vision of an internet, couched in very different language. So the computer game led me to a book. The book led me back to computers and the question of how people would use them and what worlds would come out of that. So this was a kind of a big moment in my life, actually. It was a good Christmas present. Thank you, Dad. And so I'm going to jump from there and go back in time to early computer history. We're just going to look at the history of computers for a minute. We're going to talk about one-dimension, two-dimensional, and three-dimensional interactions with computers, and use that as a frame for talking about what's next. This is a teletype. It's a one-dimensional interface, right? There's a single string of text which you read left to right, top to bottom. New stuff comes in the bottom. And this begets the computer terminal, the console, which you've all seen. You can also use that for fun, as I did as a child of the 80s. This is Zork. If you've never played a text adventure game, you should. If you've never written your undergraduate thesis in the form of a text adventure game, you shouldn't. It's a terrible idea. From here we go and we build two-dimensional interfaces out of pictures. Now once you've built a two-dimensional interface, you need some way to indicate intent on that surface. So you get things like the mouse. The mouse was basically brought to you by one dude, Douglas Engelbart. I don't know if you all know his name, but in 1968, he did a technology demo that has been, for about 20 years, the only way people refer to this is as the mother of all demos. In one session, he demonstrated in 1968 the concept of the word processor, clickable hyperlinks, video conferencing, live collaborative editing by two people separated by 50 miles. Like a lot of amazing and mind-blowing things, it's also kind of boring. Moby Dick of demos. This is the... so that was a great act of creation and a guide for us as we go forward. We're gonna come back to that a little bit. But then we get 3 dimensions as well, somewhere along the line. The precise year is not clear, but fairly early on, people start thinking about how to press a 3D world into the picture plane of the computer, the way that was done in paintings. And figuring out the math behind that is a challenge, and we have people like Ed Catmull to thank. So you take a viewfinder and you press this little imaginary 3D world into the screen, right? We're going to come back to that as well. So we get toward the 2000s, and there's more and more tools available for us to sort of press the envelope of how you can interact with computers. This is where I'm coming into the picture in a minute. But first, just one more blast from the past. 1967, the first touch screen is prototyped. I think you have to press pretty hard. This was 2004 or 5, so I'm on a small team, and we're not even the only team doing this type of thing, but we're working on a touchable wall technology. The rationale is pixels will be abundant, and let's allow people to touch them, at large scale. This seems like an obvious, natural next step at that moment. So we come up with a way to track multiple independent fingers on a surface in a way that is fast and robust and cheap. And then we build it. We go from this. I cut myself a lot on those things. Those are really sharp. We get to this. We make it here. Our stuff is live in the airport for years. So we want to make a splash. We want to change the world. Now here's a touch technology that came out 2 years later that did change the world. You might have heard of it. Part of the reason it changed the world is because it came from a giant manufacturer that knows what it's doing, not like a little research team. But another part of the reason it changed the world is because it's solving a different problem, and it's solving, in some ways, a more urgent problem. There's a powerful idea here that is not present here. Or rather, there's a problem here, and it's that guy looking back over his shoulder. How does he feel right now? So you're standing in front of this huge dynamic software surface. But if you touch here, the visual consequences of what you touch might be over there. And actually, when you're arm's length from something that's 12 feet wide, you can't see that well across the whole span because of the angle. The people who can see the full consequences of what you might be doing, and this is poorly designed software, by the way. I didn't write this. But the people who can see the whole thing are strangers, and they're behind your back. So you've basically signed up to be a performer, and most people don't like performing. It's not my favorite thing either. No, just kidding. So if you think about your own relationship with your phone for a second, it's obviously nothing like that. Your phone opens onto a huge world for you. But to access that world, you don't even have to put your pants on, right? So when we set out, we didn't realize consciously that we're putting people in a performer position. We didn't quite think that through. And maybe the right word for what we could have used would be empathy. So we didn't spend enough time thinking about how it would feel to be the person using the technology, because we were pretty busy building it. And so I think we did a good job, but we didn't necessarily change the world. It was not a major event in like human history. But that's not the end of the story. There's lots of more good things to come. So now, I think that the two technologies, the sort of touch wall and the touch thing in your pocket, they point in two directions, and I think those two directions are going to be significant directions with a lot of room to run over the next 20 years. One of them is about personal interaction and a relationship between you and machines that has migrated from the workplace, started migrating into the home in the 70s and the 80s, and from the desk into your pocket, and from your pocket onto your wrist, or wherever else it goes. It's going to measure your blood chemistry. It's going to help you know if you're getting the morning crankies and need to have a banana or take a walk. This is a intimate one-to-one personal relationship, and that will grow. We know that's going to happen. But the other direction is this development of shared social systems and the things we interact with together. So the touch wall is one of that category, but we all know about the Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation and the Amazon Echo. Does everybody know about the Amazon Echo? It's like a little microphone stand in your house, and anybody in the room can speak to it, right? And ask it what the weather is like outside, or you can just look out the window. But the car stereo is like a shared interactive system with a long pedigree. Like I turn the volume up and you turn it down. That's why it only has one volume knob, right? Because you have to push some social interaction, some social negotiation back to the user. And so we enable environments. These enabled environments are interesting, and they're actually, I would tell you, they're in a much more primitive state right now than the personal technologies that we use. Here's a vision of an enabled environment, going back to 2002. So this film has had some staying power as a technology vision. There was a concerted effort to make this imaginary future a good one. They got some really good people to work on it, and the result is interactions with technology that feel plausible, internally consistent. They make dramatic and emotional sense. So you can really feel this world. John Underkoffler is the name of a guy who started my company, and he created all these interactions. As he was doing that, he was treating the whole film project as a design brief for a real system. He created a full. This notebook is a photocopy of a real notebook, which is big, and he trained Tom Cruise and the other actors in how to use this real system, even though it was not a real system; it was green screened. But like Doug Engelbart, like Steve Jobs says, real artists ship. So John kept working. He started a company around some of these ideas, and we eventually were building and shipping things like this. This is a visualization of underground geology. So you can kind of slice and dice this model of a piece of the earth. There are these little wells sunk down into it, and you can play with the paths that they might follow. So now the gesture interaction is part of this work that people tend to pay a lot of attention to, because that was novel. The gestures may be a niche. They may not change the world, or they may. It's kind of too soon to tell. But there's some other animating ideas behind this that make it feel interesting. One of those ideas is something that we call the Luminous Room. It's when we enable an environment, but instead of defining the aquarium in terms of just like pressing it into the screen and having a little virtual world in there, it's defined in terms of the user's own space. In Neuromancer, cyberspace is privileged by these people who have access to it and know how to use it, and they derisively refer to the world in which we live as meat space. In the Luminous Room, in our idea of it, meat space is actually privileged. So I don't have it in this clip, but I can hover my hand above that table, or I can drag something from the wall onto that table. It's all in one continuous space. So you've taken the 3D aquarium and you've kind of shattered the glass, and the water has filled up the room. So you're working in your space, and the frames on the walls and on the floor and wherever are just extensions of your space, and you're the fish. So once you go down that path, you can get to systems which look and feel quite different from the ones we usually build. This is a guy named John who's on my team, and he's prototyping a new application. Actually, this is a couple of years ago. And the colors are ugly, and the labels are all janky, and the text goes backwards. But he's kind of working out some ideas about how to visualize data. And it feels different. This room wraps around him. It's actually, we call it an immersive environment. This one happens to be in the shape of a hexagon, but we play with all kinds of different configurations as we do client work. This is our warehouse over in the Arts District, right by the gun club. I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to have a warehouse over there, or they're going to be able to have a gun club. I feel like there's going to be an Apple store over there in about 5 minutes. But now let's add more people. That's only one guy. To make these, an enabled environment is supposed to be useful to more than one person. Otherwise, it would just be another personal system. This is an interesting conversation. I like how the second guy, his gestures don't make the system do anything. He doesn't have the gloves on. They're part of the social conversation. The first guy's gestures are part of the social conversation and the technology conversation. When you work with an Alexa, you say, Alexa, what's the weather? You have to preface your sentence, right? And Siri wants that too. Essentially, you're putting on verbal gloves for the duration of your command. It's kind of Simon Says, do this. In this scene, the dude with the gloves on, he can't make a gesture without controlling the system, right? With gloves, it's a little hard to say Simon Says and then not say Simon Says because you're wearing something. So that's a bit of a challenge for these kinds of systems. But in the film, you can gloss an issue like that. We are working on collaborative systems at Oblong. They look like this, and they look like this, and they look like this. But it's very early days. So, like I said, we're at the start of things. There's a lot of hard problems once you get more than one person involved. Technology gets harder. And the sort of emotional intelligence that's required, I think, goes up. But I'm excited about the potential for Luminous Room. I'm excited that Luminous Rooms are going to be able to move around, driverless cars. I think we know that's coming. And we kind of know how we feel about driverless cars, socially, emotionally, because we've already had them, like Jane Austen novels. You take a carriage if you can afford one. I mean, if you're John Willoughby, maybe you want to go riding on horseback, go hunting and do something butch. But if you can afford to, you typically take a carriage. And I think that'll be true in the future as well. Here's a nice luminous room from the Cosmos TV show. It's called The Ship of the Imagination. And Neil deGrasse Tyson does, he can visualize and work with data and teach you things inside. He can look out through the viewfinder. So when you're in your luminous room in Los Angeles in the year 2040, the room knows where it is in meat space. It knows where you are. If you're pointing and you're looking, it can know where you're pointing and where you're looking. And if you say, what's that? There's a line, an imaginary line from your finger to, whatever you're pointing at. Drop me off over there. Follow that car. All that kind of stuff. That's what you can get when you take the concept of meat space, where we live, seriously. So I think that's an important ingredient for computers to understand us socially as well as personally, to understand our cues, how we space ourselves in relationship to each other, and how we don't. In a meeting, nobody stands on the table, right? Like we have a highly structured relationship to space around each other, and computers don't understand it yet. Sometimes Neil deGrasse Tyson gets boring and you just take a nap in Luminous Room, by the way. So just really quickly, I'll wind up by saying I like science fiction when it's done well because of the emotional plausibility, the way in which, in order to draw you in as a reader to that world, the thing they get you by is not by your ideas and by your higher cortex. They get you by your feelings. And when people offer a technology to you that asks you to go against your own feelings, or rather, go against your disciplined and careful attention and your ability to project into the feelings of somebody else, then I think you're being sold a bill of goods, right? So, like, nobody is going to wear this. This is not going to happen. This is an ad for virtual reality. Making people feel this way is being promoted to you. Making your friends lose their shit is not going to change the world, right? Virtual reality has interesting angles on the Luminous Room. Augmented reality, which is where you paint and decorate onto the world for somebody, which is what like Magic Leap is working on and Microsoft is working on with the HoloLens, I think is a little more compelling, frankly. But again, I think the lens that we use to apply as we evaluate possible futures is available not just to those with like a technical training. It's available to anybody with with a careful sense for the the empathic response of the people who have to use this stuff. So I will leave you with an image of technological success. Where do you want it? This is how technology should make you feel. A successful augmentation should make you feel proud and good, and should not make you fall off of your chair in fear. So I'm happy to take questions.